Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I have a fantastic and fascinating guest with me today. He has a very interesting story to share with us and a very important message as well. His name is Doug Buggle. He is a father, author, and narcissistic abuse survivor. His book is titled Goodbye Tammy. Third Time Was Not a Charm. Surviving Narcissistic Abuse. He is an advocate for all survivors of narcissistic abuse with a powerful message that healing is possible, that you are not alone, and that we need more men talking about this topic because abuse has no gender. Doug, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you very much, and I appreciate you having me.
Yes, well, and first of all, before we even begin, I want to congratulate you, number one, on the book, because I
Yes,
know
thank you so much.
writing a book is not for the faint of heart. Um,
Correct.
and to congratulate you on being able to end the narcissistic and abusive relationship and to have the courage to be able to tell your story.
Thank you. Yes, that's a big part of it. Yep. Thank you.
Yes, because I think a lot of people will like, oh, they know women get abused, but there is definitely a lot of men who experience all kinds of abuse. And it really makes me happy that some of them are coming forward and sharing their stories.
For sure. And and again, we talked about it before. I'm not here for just the men. I'm here for all abuse
Hmm.
survivors. It's just I know that there's a big demand for people hearing from men. That's why we
Hmm.
say abuse has no gender. I know the statistic shows that more women are abused by male narcissists than men are abused by female narcissists, but it's still a staggering 30% of narcissists are female, and the majority of them are covert. And that's
Hmm.
what I was dealing with was a covert narcissist. And we can get into the different types if you want, because I had no clue. I knew nothing of narcissism. I knew nothing of the narcissistic personality disorder
Hmm.
up until her discard of me, which was
Hmm.
brutal. And the
Hmm.
discard is the worst, absolute worst.
Hmm.
And so once you go, when I was going through that, I couldn't understand why she was doing what she was doing.
Hmm.
And that's when I started my research because I needed to know why. I needed
Hmm.
to know why my wife of almost 12 years was suddenly, you know, acting this way and doing this to me.
Okay,
So,
let's talk about that, Doug, because like you said, your wife of 12 years,
yes.
prior to when all of the signs or the symptoms or whatever became very obvious, did you have any clue in those early years that there was something a little bit off?
Yes. And they were always there.
Mm-hmm.
But what you have to understand about narcissistic abuse is that, the first stage is love bombing. And that's when they convince you that you're soulmates and that you can do no wrong. She used to call me her Superman. She actually bought Superman floor mats for the vehicle we drove. And so there was a lot of love bombing we can talk about the sexual side of it, but female narcissists use sex as a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of activity there, because they manipulate and sex is the thing that most men obviously want and
Mm-hmm.
desire more of. And so they use that as a tool.
Mm-hmm.
Adversely, in the end, I'll just say this, she used it as a tool to not have sex with me, to
Mm-hmm.
withhold it as a punishment. But going back to your point, yes, it was always there. And we
Mm-hmm.
call those red flags.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read so many different things and you hear people say, well, how could you have not seen the red flags? How could you not have seen those? Your brain, I've researched this and there's been a lot of study on this about
Mm-hmm.
the brain um, in a narcissistic abused person. It's the same as a cocaine addict. They've actually
Mm-hmm.
done brain scans. The person on the cocaine and then the person in the narcissistic abusive relationship, the scans were identical.
Wow.
So you're getting a dopamine hit, you're getting a rush, just like a drug, and your brain is actually not allowing you to see the red flags. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not like I'm just she's just having a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's the red flags are there. You think something is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and they sense that you think something is wrong, and then they come right back with all these compliments and love
Mm.
bombing you again and being nice to you and being sweet to you to
Mm-hmm.
get you to do what they want. And then then you get that dopamine hit, that
Yep.
rush, and then you're back down again, and then they start devaluing you and treating you like
Mm-hmm.
crap, you know.
I'm
So
even wondering when you're talking about the brain function, is that like a physiological reaction of the brain almost trying to protect you, like this really isn't
yes,
happening? Because even,
yes.
when you're in a situation that is either very terrifying or very dangerous, it's almost like this isn't happening, and you have a
Hmm.
tendency to either shut down, pull back, or even dissociate.
Yes, it's the fight or flight mechanism in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't know too much about it, but I know enough to know that it's the fight or flight in the brain, and your brain is receiving your brain is receiving trauma from the person you're in love with, who says they're in
Mm-hmm.
love with you, that you're
Mm-hmm.
bonded to. That's where the term comes in, trauma bond. The trauma bond is when you are like addicted to your narcissist. You
Mm-hmm.
are addicted. It's the same thing with abusive women who are physically abused, and you hear about them going back to their abuser.
Mm-hmm.
As a normal person, you go, how could they do that? That person
Mm-hmm.
abused them. It's the Stockholm syndrome, it's the trauma bond. And so you're receiving trauma from someone you're bonded to. Now, let me note, narcissists do not bond to anything, they don't have the ability. So they're not bonded to you. They don't love you. They're not in love with you. You are there to serve a function. You are there to serve their needs in a financial way. It could be compliments, it could be out of
Mm-hmm.
admiration, it could be a range of things. And that's where we get into the term supply. So in the narcissistic world, all the experts, we call that the narcissistic supply.
Mm-hmm.
There's something within them, childhood trauma, abuse, genetics. There's the
Mm-hmm.
verdict is kind of out on exactly what causes narcissism, but they are not getting what they need, and so they put a protective shell around them. It's
Mm-hmm.
sort of a fake persona,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't let you in fully, and they cannot look inward. They cannot. They don't do well with shame. So if you point out something they did wrong and you have actual proof,
Mm-hmm.
rather than looking inward like a normal person and go, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
man, I'm really sorry. I think I did yell at you, or I said something I shouldn't have, and I
Mm-hmm.
apologize, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead, what they do is they lash back out at you and they blame you and they say, you made me say that. You made me do
Mm-hmm.
that. You're the bad person.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the ability to look inward. And so they lash out at you. They blame everyone else. And then they play the victim.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have another question
Crazy.
for you. Oh, well, yeah, it is pretty much crazy. But so another question for you, because when you say that they really, a narcissist truly, they don't really care about anybody and they cannot bond with anybody. What about, if a narcissist has a child, are they able to bond with their own offspring, or is that just something that they are physiologically or emotionally, psychologically unable to do?
This may be very hard for people to believe, but I don't believe they do.
Okay.
I've read studies that say that they don't even bond to their own children.
Wow.
Um, One of the reasons I've read other studies, and look, I am no expert. I am not a doctor. I am not a psychologist. This is all based upon my experience and the
Mm-hmm.
research that I've done, and it's my true story of what really happened. But from what I understand, is oxytocin is the
Mm-hmm.
chemical in your body that you produce, um, and it's the bonding chemical. So a really good example: if you have children,
Mm-hmm.
a mom gives birth to their baby, her
Mm-hmm.
body is pumping out a tremendous amount of oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
So when the baby's born, the doctor lays it on your chest, you're immediately bonded to that child.
Mm-hmm.
The father is also getting oxytocin,
Mm-hmm.
and he's going in, putting his arm around his wife, and where all that stuff is happening, that's the bonding. They
Mm-hmm.
have found that narcissists have very low to none oxytocin production.
Wow.
And so they just don't have the ability to bond. Now, they're very good at faking it. They're
Mm-hmm.
very good at faking empathy, faking the bonding. A lot of narcissistic mothers or fathers will just use their children as pawns, maybe
Mm-hmm.
live through them. One is usually the golden child. One, if they have more than one, it could be the golden child. The other could be the scapegoat. It's very complicated, but there's a lot out there
Okay.
about that.
So another question for you then, and I know you're not a psychologist, but you've done an awful lot of research.
Yes.
What is the difference? I mean, between like a narcissist and, maybe a sociopath or a psychopath or whatever,
Okay.
because I mean, there's a fine line here.
There is a fine line, and I've seen articles and I've seen videos of doctors comparing the two very closely. That some people can be both, but
Hmm.
what I believe the difference between a narcissist is and a sociopath. A sociopath, their aim is to ultimately hurt people, like physically. Um, a lot of murderers, a lot of serial killers
Hmm.
that you read about, they're sociopaths with narcissistic behaviors.
Hmm.
Look, narcissism is big, and everybody has narcissistic traits. Everybody
Right,
does.
right.
I've got an off-roading Jeep sitting out there. It's my hobby, and I like showing it off on the trail, just like anyone else would. That's a narcissistic trait because it's like, hey, check out my Jeep, you
Hmm.
know. But it doesn't mean I'm a narcissist. See, so there's a difference between that. I haven't studied too much on sociopaths, but
Hmm.
I know that they can cross a bit. So can narcissists and multiple personality disorder.
I
They
wondered, yeah.
they they can kind of cross paths too.
Hmm.
I saw with my own eyes during our divorce her become a completely different person.
Hmm.
It was scary.
So she was, I mean, I don't want to use this word or this phrase, but I guess I will anyway. So she was bad enough to begin with, but then when it got to the time that you
Discard.
were divorcing,
Hmm.
and so let's backtrack a little bit,
Okay.
and just let the listeners know how the two of you met.
Okay. So we met in the Mormon Church in 2005. Yeah. So we met in the Mormon Church. My second wife, my son's mom. I have two children. This is my son's mom. We met at the Mormon Church, and from there we ended up getting married about a year later.
Hmm.
So, and well, no, we didn't get married. No, whoa, no. We met in 2005. We didn't get married till 2009.
Hmm.
We were married in 2009, but well, we met in the Mormon church and we were friends. All of us were friends for a
Hmm.
while.
And
Her
I
ex,
found that a very interesting part of your story because you actually were friends, your family and her husband, so you knew her husband very well,
yes.
which that becomes a very important part
Hmm.
of your story
Hmm.
as we go along. So we'll just put that little
Yeah, and
thought.
it's all in the book. And
Hmm.
there's some really crazy things about where her ex-husband before me, because
Hmm.
we were friends before, where
Hmm.
him and I are now,
Hmm.
is really important.
Hmm.
Where him and I are now, because I helped raise his two kids as my stepkids.
Hmm.
Thank God I had no actual biological children with her.
Yeah.
So it was easier to break. But no, the other thing to point out too is the book is called Third Time Was Not a Charm,
Hmm.
because we were both married three times. This was our third marriage, and I found her first husband
Hmm.
from 25 years ago. I only knew a name, and and that he was abusive and all these things she told me, and she told
Hmm.
her second ex. And once we were going through our divorce, I was really like, knowing that she lied about all the stuff for me, and she lied all about the stuff with her my friend who was the second ex. My him and I were talking, and we're like, we need to find this guy.
Yeah.
So I found him, and he emailed me back immediately, and we spoke on the phone for 4 hours. And he is the nicest guy. And I'm telling you right now, if you read the book, there's a whole chapter about him and what she did to him. They were married less than 2 years. But what
Wow.
he did to her, or I mean, what she did to him will blow your mind. And there's one thing I want to say, and this is why the book is so important. I didn't know he was going to order my book. And one day I come home, and him and I had, he lives back east, but we would text from
Hmm.
time to time.
Hmm.
I get a text message from him of a picture of my book. And I'm like, oh my God, you ordered my book? He's like, yeah, dude, I just got back from a business trip. And he said, I saw it sitting there. I walked away and then I ran back to it. He goes, I couldn't wait to read my chapter. He sent me the most amazing, like my whole thing has been, if I could just help one person, if I can
Mm-hmm.
just help one person going through this, it'd be worth it. I never thought in a million years it would be him, because I was only focused on interviewing him and getting his story. Because,
Right.
25, 30 years ago, and he's moved on. He's got a wife and three kids and a
Right.
whole great life. He tells me, "You captured my chapter so beautifully." I'm paraphrasing. He said it was almost like the marriage never happened. A lot of
Wow.
people don't even know about it. And he said, but I'll admit, when I was alone, driving alone on a fishing trip or something, I would have thoughts of, did I do it right? Could I have done it
Mm-hmm.
differently? This and that. And he said, I've never said this to anyone. He said, but you gave me the healing that I
Oh.
never knew I needed. I was in
Oh.
tears. I was in tears because I'm like, oh my God, like that's how powerful it was. And so, yeah, so I found him and it's pretty crazy. So,
Mhm. Well, okay, let's talk about that a little bit more because, you are, or at least you told me, you're not a writer or an author, but yet you were able to write this book and you were
yes.
able to write it, I think, in a relatively short period of time. For somebody who considers themselves not an author or a writer, then how did you do it?
So what happened was, and I'm going to be really quick with this part of it because there's a more important part. I was going through such a horrible time and I was emotionally distraught. I wasn't eating, I wasn't
Hmm.
sleeping. I'm in the middle of this discharge. She's falsely accusing me of domestic violence and abuse. I mean,
Jeez.
just horrible, horrible things that I know I didn't do, that I know I didn't do. So I reached out to friends and family, and they're like, "You need to journal. You need to write down your thoughts."
Mm-mm.
Because part of the trauma bond is you want to call that person, you want to talk to that person, you want to, that's you have this. I know it sounds crazy, but you're away from this person, but you need that dopamine hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just start journaling, and I ended up writing her an email that I never sent her. It was 16, turned into 16 pages, and it was basically me calling her out on everything, you know,
Mm-hmm.
without using the word narcissism because I
Mm-hmm.
was scared to death. I didn't want to diagnose her or call her something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sent it to some family and friends, and they're like, "You need to write a book." And I'm like, I don't know how to write. I'm not a good like, no, you're a good writer. I'm like, no.
No.
So finally I read it to my therapist, and he was like the
Uh-huh.
fifth person that says, you need to write a book because you have so many things in this story. So that's when I decided to do it. And I did it in about 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
There ended up being 21 revisions. And once it was completed, now that people are reading it, the feedback I'm getting is always the same. You are such a good writer. Like I love the way you write. I'm in it with you, and it's so easy to read, meaning it's you don't want to put it down.
Right.
And so I was thinking about that the other day, and I'm like, and everyone says you need to write a second book. I have no desire to write another book. I wouldn't even know what to write about,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I was thinking about this divine intervention. I'm Christian. I believe in God, and I was thinking about this, and I thought, the truth needed to be told.
Mm-hmm.
God put me in that position because the truth needed to be told. I changed all the names for privacy issues. I have a disclaimer. I don't dox her. I don't, none of that.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth needed to be told, and I feel like it just flowed within me, and it
Mm-hmm.
just came out. And of course I went back and made sure that it was, I had to tell my backstory and my childhood a little bit. And
Right.
you get a feel for who I am as a person. And I want to say something else too, is I made a lot of mistakes. I am not perfect. I never made marriage ending mistakes with her, but
Mm-hmm.
I, I, I own up to all my faults. I own up to all my mistakes. So this book is very honest. It's very raw. Some of it's embarrassing
Mm-hmm.
because I tell it. I tell it good, bad, ugly, everything. I don't paint a picture of I'm this perfect person and she's the devil. I
Mm-hmm.
paint this picture of, yeah, I made mistakes, but you know, this is what happened to me and this is what she did to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a sad reality to know that the only way you can truly heal from narcissistic abuse is you have to get out of the relationship. You have to get out, get away, and move on with your life and live a good life.
I want to just focus on one thing that you said. It's, because of what she did to you. But since
Right.
you and I have spoken before, and I know your whole story, um, and forgive me if this is off limits, but it was not just what she did to you, it was how she treated your son.
Yes.
And if I remember
That's hard.
correctly, that was the catalyst that said, I'm done. I'm out of here.
Yes. And I can give you some examples of that. So, my son is now 19.
Hmm.
He's Mormon. I'm no longer Mormon.
Hmm.
He's Mormon, very active in his church. He's in Thailand right now on his 2-year Mormon mission.
Hmm.
He's doing very well, super talented guy. But from a very young age, when we married, she she was annoyed by him. She was always nitpicking at him. She would say things to him like, his name in the book is Jared, and she would just look at him and like judge him in silence. And she would be like, then she'd say, Jared, why are you sitting like that? Jared, why are you eating like that? Jared, why are you laying like that? And he had all these rules that were only for him, and she would just berate him and belittle him and treat him badly, and he knew it, but he was too scared to say anything, and
Right.
and I was too scared to see it. And so it got to a point as he was growing older. One of the saddest things for me was every year we would go to a family reunion up in Utah to see her
Mhm.
family, and he was probably 15 at the time, and she was came up to me and she's like, "Hey, my family's planning this big reunion again in the summer in a couple months, and I really want to go." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that would be great. Let's go." And by the way, her family loved my son. They thought he was like a great kid. He was
Mhm.
polite and had fun with all their kids and whatever. And I said, "Well, of course, Jared's invited, right?" She goes, "Oh yeah, yeah, they invited him, but I don't want him to go." And I was like, "What?" My heart sank. I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You know how he is. He's so annoying to be around. And I just don't, I just want to relax with my family and not worry about his behavior." And this was the first time I really stood up to her. And I said, "Well, you know what then?" I said, "If he's not going, I'm not going." And I was waiting for that. Oh, no, 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 no. Right. She looked right at me and goes, "Okay, then I'll just take my kids." Like she could
Wow.
give two
So
shits that
she
I was
did
going.
have kids of her own.
Yeah. I helped. Yeah. She has a son and a daughter,
Uh-huh.
and I helped raise them as stepkids. Their dad was very involved in their life too. He lived right
Hmm.
close by. So that was one of the things. The major thing was, they got into this big confrontation. She confronted him over his laptop laying on his bed in the morning, and she
Mm.
accused him of, computers are not allowed in the house in the bedrooms. He's 16 at this point, and
Hmm.
she's like, she accused him of doing inappropriate things on the computer in the middle of the night. Now,
Hmm.
look, my kid's Mormon. He's trying to go on a mission. He's not he doesn't do those things. He values his church membership. I believe him when he says he stood up to her in the beginning and said,
Right.
"I don't do that. I don't do what you're accusing me of." And she
Good
started
for
calling him a
him.
liar. And but she's twisting his answers around. She's getting him confused. I'm sitting there looking at this, and when I see my son, who's 6'3", standing there and he's in tears,
Mm.
I immediately make the connection that she's doing exactly to him what she's been doing to me for 12 years. And that's when I was like, "Jared, we're leaving." And I got him out of there. This was still, though, like 2 months before I moved out. But this was sort of the final straw. And there's
Hmm.
many more examples that are in the book, but this
Hmm.
was the final straw. And, it's just so sad because she definitely psychologically abused him.
Hmm.
She tried to convince me early on that he had Asperger's, that he was on the autism skid. It was bad, and but I want to go back to trauma bond.
Hmm.
This is the shitty thing about the trauma bond. My son's an exceptionally good singer. He actually
Hmm.
made state finals for choir, which is
Hmm.
very hard to do. He's an excellent water polo player in high school. I found myself during the divorce at his Christmas concert, his solos, this beautiful singing. He's the president of the choir, student body choir,
Wow.
his senior year. But guess what I'm doing? I'm sitting in the audience wishing she was here to see this. Because in my twisted brain, I'm still trying to prove to that woman that he's a good kid.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Like,
Yeah. It's crazy, but it's
it's
very, it's crazy, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
in a bizarre and twisted way because, you think that if you could only do the right thing or say the right thing or show her the right thing, that
Yes. That
everything
she'll
would be
believe that
just
he's good.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And here I am in the middle of the divorce. It's over. We're never going to be together again. And I'm still in my brain trying to prove to her that my son is good.
Wow.
That's how, yeah. I mean, I'm
So
good
now,
now. It's okay now. I don't do that now, but this was 4 years ago. So,
okay, so how long then you have been divorced? 4 years?
three,
Three?
but it all started about 10 months before that. So I actually asked for a temporary separation.
Mm-hmm.
I initiated this.
Mm-hmm.
I asked for a temporary separation because I knew something, like you said earlier, I knew something was wrong. I
Yeah.
couldn't put my finger on it, but all these things we're talking about, I wasn't myself around her. The family saw it,
Mm-hmm.
friends saw it, and I just wanted at the time, I loved her and I thought we could work on our marriage and we were in marriage counseling. And so I moved out temporarily, I thought, stayed with a friend, and that lasted 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
June, July, or no, April, May, and June of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And that lasted 3 months. But that's when the weird things started happening.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not allowed back in my house, even though I'm paying for it and I'm on the lease.
Okay, I
Um,
don't
they,
want to give away the store.
no, I know.
But there is the most incredible. I just want the listeners to understand some of the stuff that you went through. You got to get the book and read the book to hear some of these stories. But something in particular that happened regarding the house, and I mean, it was just nuts. This woman was just, I don't want to say she's evil, but yeah.
No, yeah, I definitely evil behavior,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing different personalities. But the biggest thing for me was yeah, the evil behavior, but it was her ability, we call it flipping the switch off.
Mm.
Like we were literally on a date night 2 weeks before she went nuclear. And we were talking right up until that point. And yeah, things were rocky. I mean, whatever, but we're still talking. We're going on date nights. And we go from going on a date night to I'm there with a sheriff's deputy trying to get my stuff. And I have never seen her or spoken to her since that day, other than twice in court, and you're like separated. But I mean, outside
Wow.
of a courtroom setting. So imagine being married to someone for 12 years, and then suddenly it's just the cutoff with no closure. Narcissists do not give you closure. Only you can give you the closure. I struggled with that for a long time because you want the talk, you want the goodbye. You, as
Mhm,
humans, we want to, even if it's I'm accepting blame, you're
mhm,
accepting some of the blame, you're crying, you're upset, but at least in the end, you're like, good luck to you. This isn't working out. We can be
mhm.
civil. You might run into them a year down the road at the grocery store, and at least you can be like, hey, how's life?
Yeah.
Not with a narcissist. A narcissist will cut you at your knees, falsely accuse you of everything under the sun. And it is like you are mourning the death of a person who's still alive.
Wow.
That's the crazy part because I know she's right there a town over. I know where she works. I know she's still
Mhm.
in the house. And it's literally like if I go knock at the door, then I'm stalking her and I'm going to be restraining order put on me. I mean, it's that crazy. So that was the hardest part for me is my mind was like, I don't understand this.
So how did you wrap your head around all of this? And I mean, I know you saw a therapist. I don't know if you still do, but how do you you have to feel so violated?
Yes. So it was very difficult to wrap my head around it, to be honest. I was suffering from sleep deprivation. I was lost a ton of weight. I was leaning on family and friends. Some of them couldn't understand because like my sister was like, you told us this is what you wanted. Like you told us that she's this, you don't want to be with her anymore. And now you're freaking out because she filed for divorce and like whatever. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why am I feeling I should be happy, right? Or I should just get through this because this is what I wanted. I moved out. But
Mm-hmm.
so that's when the educational part came in for me. That's when after 6 weeks of really just thinking it was the end for me, not like suicidal, but like,
Right.
just really bad. That's when I started listening to podcasts, and I
Hmm.
started to look for self-help for men, and that's when the first time I heard the word narcissism come up, and oh, okay, what's this? And I started listening, and then I heard about the abuse cycle, love bombing,
Hmm.
devaluing, discard. And I started to think about our marriage and our relationship, and it all lined up. And then I started learning about the different types of narcissism. There's like 9 different types.
Jeez.
And so I'm going through the checklist. Grandiose. No, that's not her. Malignant. No, that's not her. And as I'm going through, I got to covert. And then I watched this video from I can't remember his name, is a psychologist. And the video was actually titled Covert Narcissist Wife. And so I watched this 20-minute video, and it was like he was in the room with me in a therapy session talking about my marriage. I mean,
Wow.
everything was 100% spot on. And that's when I knew without a shadow of a doubt. And then I thought of her childhood trauma and what she went through, and everything just lined up.
Hmm.
Um, but then I also, it's not a revenge thing. It was, people need to know about this. There needs to be awareness about this. Because
Hmm.
I was listening to this podcast, and it was, like we say, it was all women talking
Hmm.
about narcissistic men. And again, I
Hmm.
don't invalidate their experiences, but I found a podcast that was the first podcast I was on, and it was a man who had gone through even worse than I did. And yeah, and he
Whoa.
told it, well, because he had kids, he has kids with her, and
Oh.
he's escorted out of his home in handcuffs,
Oh my God.
and he didn't do anything, but it was just accusations, right? Well, that didn't happen to me. I mean, so yeah, it's way worse than mine. So his podcast is amazing, and I reached out, I listened to like the first 10 episodes back to back, and then I emailed him and thought, I want to be a guest on a show, and he's actually had me on twice, and so it started from there,
So let me
really.
ask you this because I think I might have seen something about his post or something on your Instagram. And I think I want to say it was the unlikely expert.
Okay, that's no, that's Dave. He's amazing. It's not the he's his Instagram is healing after a narcissist,
Okay.
and he has a huge following. He is just starting up that podcast. It's brand new,
Mhm.
and I was one of his first guests, and it hasn't been released yet.
Okay.
Called The Unlikely Experts. No, this was Dimming the Gaslight.
Ah, okay.
Dimming the
Okay.
Gaslight, and he came up with a brilliant name, Dimming
Yeah.
the Gaslight. And I've been on his, and the other one is uh, Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. So there's been several, but
Yeah.
no, the one I'm referring to is Dimming the Gaslight.
Okay. Yeah. Wow,
So
that is a great name.
yeah,
But I mean,
it
it
is.
does turn you, just the experience itself turns you into an expert.
That's why his podcast is called The Unlikely Experts.
Yeah.
And Dave, and one of my favorite quotes. It's kind of comical, but it's true. That I read is, I was just looking for my soulmate, but instead I got my PhD in narcissistic abuse.
Wow.
Right. And then it says, now enjoy how educated I really am. Because it's like, it's
So
true
I
though.
have to ask too, how does this impact relationships going forward? Because I would imagine that, the caution, sign would
Yep.
be up all the time and you're probably looking for red flags. When, you
Yep.
meet somebody who you think is attractive, you might want to get to know it. Like, do I really want to go there?
So for a lot of people, a lot of people have zero, or have no more trust issues. They have, sorry, how do I say this? They have trust issues like big time. They cannot trust again. Right.
Yeah.
So major trust issues. They don't. I've read comments from men and talked to men who just completely don't want anything to do with women anymore. They want to be
Hmm.
alone the rest of their lives. I don't believe in that. So there's the extreme of that, and it can be to someone like me who, yes, I've trusted again. I am in the most beautiful relationship now with my girlfriend,
Hmm.
who allows me to be me and loves me for me. It's amazing. So life, it can happen,
Hmm.
but you get those people, and then you get someone like me. But the biggest thing is you now see the red flags.
Yeah.
It's something that What do they say? It's the club none of us wanted to be a part of,
Mm-hmm.
or none of
Mm-hmm.
us asked to join. It's the
Right.
club that none of us asked to join, but we're in it. And now I see the red signs, and I can easily pick up on
Mm-hmm.
red flags, narcissistic behavior. Doesn't mean that person's a narcissist. It just means I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean I know with that person if to set a boundary with them,
Mm-hmm.
or if it's somebody you go on a date and you I went on lots of dates, right? With
Mm-hmm.
not when I said just mean like a dinner date. I
Mm-hmm.
went on a lot of dinner dates before I met my girlfriend, and
Mm-hmm.
several of them I saw red flags, and I was very
Mm-hmm.
polite the next day. I finished the date, I'm polite, and the
Mm-hmm.
next day I just say, hey, I don't think there's a connection here. Good luck to you. So,
Yeah.
you know, but you're able to see red flags. You're able
Mm-hmm.
to see the behavior now with a clear lens.
Mm-hmm.
And the other crazy part is there's things that aren't in the book that still to this day I think of.
Mm.
Craziness. There's one quick story that doesn't have any relevance. I've never told it. I'd love to tell it if it's okay.
Absolutely.
So, okay, this is crazy. So she worked at a middle school, and one of my best friends, she doesn't work there anymore. One of my best friends I met him there. He was the head custodian at this middle school. Well, his other friend is now the custodian at that school. Okay. And he was the assistant before. So we're setting this up as the assistant custodian and the custodian, and she worked there as well. She comes home one day and she tells me while we're married that her principal, her boss, is the meanest, jerkiest guy. She's crying. He was yelling at me in front of the lunch shelter, in front of all the kids, and he was screaming at me. And I'm thinking, I don't. He seems like a nice guy to me, but okay. She goes, and when I finally turned around and walked away, I slipped on a pickle that the kids had dropped, and I fell onto my knees, and nobody helped me. And I was crying, and I got up and disheveled, and I was so embarrassed. Now, what does that do for me? I'm giving her the supply. I'm giving her the attention. I'm giving
Mm-hmm.
her the, oh my God, I'm so sorry this happened to you. This was years ago. Fast forward to a couple months ago. Me and those two buddies are having dinner, and we're having drinks and we're having dinner. And I didn't bring it up. My friend is like, how's the book? I need to read your book. He's like, can I? Yeah, here it is, whatever. And then this is crazy because he knew her. He's like, this is crazy. This is crazy. He goes, I never knew this was going on. And I said, yeah. And he goes, but you know what? He goes, it was really odd behavior from her. I'm like, what do you mean? Oh, this one time, this had never been discussed. He goes,
Okay.
this one time, I had just cleaned up the lunch shelter. There's nobody around. I'm 50 feet away from her. I see her walking across the lunch shelter. She trips and falls and kind of looks around and like gets all embarrassed and scurries off. And I was going to go see if I could help her, but by then she was too far gone. I'm like, what? He goes, what do you mean? I go, she told me she fell in a pickle and that her boss was yelling at her and that there were kids everywhere. And he goes, no, dude, she was by herself and she skinned her knee, I guess, or whatever. And so I know this sounds like a weird story, but it's an example of what the narcissist will do to gain your attention and gain your sympathy. She lied about the whole thing, made it all up just to gain more attention from me. Does that make sense?
It makes no sense at all, but it does make sense.
I
But
mean, you understand what I'm
it's
trying to say.
oh, absolutely. But I mean, a part of me almost wants to feel sorry for her or for
Yeah.
somebody who craves attention that much that they would, lie,
Yeah.
manipulate, and do whatever. And, it's, oh, I just,
But with a covert narcissist, their image is everything.
right.
Their public image and their persona is everything. In the public workplace, in the school system, wherever you see her, most of the time you're going to see 100% of the time you would never know. She's so
Hmm.
sweet and nice and pretty
Oh,
and whatever, and she seems like a
right.
normal person. That's the mask. They call that,
Hmm.
they have their mask on. It's
Hmm.
an invisible mask. Their fake persona is up. When they say the narcissist mask slips, it comes off, that's when their true self comes out. And
Hmm.
for most covert narcissists, it's always behind closed doors.
Hmm.
It's always in private with their significant other, their children, or with whatever. So
Hmm.
that's why, I always wanted to be in public with her. I always wanted to have the parties at our house. I always
Mm.
wanted to have the barbecues because when there's other people around or we're in
Mm-hmm.
public, I'm the greatest husband again.
Right.
And she's nice to me and sweet to me and fun. And when it's just us or just me and her and my son, it's it's back to the manipulation, the
Mm.
gaslighting, the everything's my fault and nitpicking and complaining about everything.
Mhm.
So, and the
And here I
abuse.
am. I'm going to start digging into your personal life again. Sorry about that, but
Sure,
I'm
no,
going.
I'm an open book. That's why I wrote the
Okay.
book.
I want to know about your girlfriend. So when you first started dating her, how long did it take before you shared a lot of your personal experiences and stories with her? And when you did, what was her reaction?
It took a few months. Um, but you got to understand, I mean, I probably okay, I I probably met her quicker than I should have. Because it's like, they say you should heal and find yourself again before you date again.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gone on a few dates, and this is again divine intervention. I'm just going to say it. I had gone
Mm-hmm.
on some dates, and I said, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to date anymore. I kind of wanted to see if I still had it, like if I was still attractive to other women.
Mm-hmm.
And once I realized I was, I got out, of that dating scene. And then she messaged me. We met on a dating app on eHarmony. And so she messaged me on a dating app, and I was not really into it. I wasn't really like, I was nice, but I wasn't like, usually you jump right into texting and talking on the phone and you set
Mm-hmm.
up that first date. We didn't speak on the phone until our date. So it was very weird. It was like
Mm-hmm.
we would text every other day. We were both busy for like 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like no pressure, no nothing. And then we finally set up our first date. And when I first met her, I was like, oh no. And what I want to do, like in a good way,
Yeah.
and what I want to say is, I was driving home from Arizona right before she had messaged me. Sorry, I needed to back up, and was done with dating. And I got this, and I was talking to God, and I was praying in the car, and I was just like, whatever. And I got this very strong feeling, and this God spoke to me and said He's going to put someone in my path. He didn't say it
Mm-hmm.
was going to be in 2 weeks. I thought it maybe 2 years. I mean, I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I met her, I kind of just knew. And when we took it very slow.
Mm-hmm.
But as I shared the information with her, um, she had gone through similar relationships too,
Uh,
and she could relate to it, and
mm-hmm.
she understood it, and she doesn't judge. She's not. She's so like she loves me for me, allows me to be who I want to be, and she just is everything. I mean, she's amazing. I don't know what else to say about her, but she's just. I don't fear coming home.
Mm.
I don't fear telling her something. In the beginning, I had to get used to being able to be open.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of challenges with this is very foreign to me,
Mm-hmm.
like her actually cooking dinner and we do the dishes together,
Mm-hmm.
listening to music, drinking a glass of wine. Um, it's okay, babe. I'll take the trash out. You don't need to worry about that. She does
Mm-hmm.
it. We share it equally, whereas before I did everything
It's a
because I was
real
always trying to make her
relationship.
happy. It's a real relationship, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And where I was always trying to make Tammy happy and doing everything I
Mm-hmm.
possibly could to make her happy, and God forbid she makes me dinner, it was I don't serve a man type attitude. And so with my girlfriend now, it's equal, it's equality, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she was very receptive to it, and she has been nothing but supportive. I can
Mm-hmm.
tell you on the flip side, being a woman, she will never read my book. She knows the story. It would be too painful for her. I mean, who would
Mm.
want to read, the intimate details of my marriages and this traumatic
Yeah.
stuff? And so she's not going to read my book, and that's fine. She
Yeah.
hasn't listened to one of my podcast interviews.
Mm-hmm.
But again, she's very supportive of me, what I'm doing. She's helped me
Mm-hmm.
promote the book. She's been at book signings with me.
Mm-hmm.
So she's
Nice.
very supportive. But when it comes to our life, it's our life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't talk too much about this when her and I are together because it's about us.
Okay, and I do want just to reiterate one more time for the listeners that there is an awful lot more to this story, that we're
Oh,
just kind of highlighting, some of the key points. So do, please check out Doug's book. And Doug, tell us where the listeners can get it and find your
um,
book.
Amazon.com. Just type in third time was not a charm. Very important to note, I wrote it under a pen name.
Mm-hmm.
The pen name is Teddy Bowers, Theodore Teddy Bowers. It's not written under Doug Buggle. So if you go to Amazon, type in my name, you won't find it. Just type in third time was not a charm. You'll see it there. It's a black with the red heart on the front.
Mm-hmm.
It's also available at my publisher,
Mm-hmm.
dorancepublishing.com. So Dorrance Publishing, but Amazon is where everyone seems to be getting it. It's
Okay,
on
great.
barnesandnoble.com. Anywhere books are sold, you can find it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I will have the link in the show notes, but I just really like for the guests to be able to articulate and,
Yeah.
tell the listeners it's just a lot more personal. So, having said that, can you share with us some of your social media or other ways that people can either connect with you or follow you? And especially as regarding connecting with you, do other men reach out to you, or, men or women? You're
Mhm.
not really in a coaching situation at this point, are you, or are
No,
you?
I'm not in a coaching situation, but I've helped a few men. One in Australia. My book
Wow.
made it all the way to Brisbane, Australia, and we had a 4.5 hour Google phone like this phone call. He really went through the ringer, and he bought my book. Another guy in the Midwest who I've become very good friends with. We haven't met yet in person. So there's been several people I've helped that have DM'd me on Instagram or Facebook
Mm,
and just said, "Hey, I'm really interested in your story, and I'm getting your book, but you know, I would love to talk to you sometime just to let you know what I'm going through." And I give them my
mhm,
number, and we talk. And so yeah, but my Instagram, I do have a narcissism Instagram.
mhm,
It's called narcissism.no.more. So it's like narcissism no more, NO,
mhm,
but narcissism.no.more. Or you can just type in Teddy Bowers, it'll come up.
mhm,
Facebook Teddy Bowers, it'll come
mhm.
up. So yeah. And on Instagram, I'm Doug Buggle, one
Okay.
word. It's an open profile. You're free to join me on my
Mhm,
personal. It's not all book stuff, it's my personal life. So
mhm.
that's fine with me. I do vet it and I do monitor it
I'll
because
bet
having
you
an open
do.
profile, I get a lot of bots and I get a lot of weird stuff, and I
Mhm,
just politely remove them. Um, but if it's somebody I see that's legit,
mhm.
you're more than welcome to follow me, and I'm always there for answering any questions or help.
So I just have one final question for
Sure,
you. Maybe it's two, I don't know. But
sure.
so how does that make you feel when you can connect with somebody and they reach out to you and you know that just, you're 4.5 hours talking to a perfect stranger and you're helping to change his life in a positive way?
Well, for one, I'm humbled, and
Mm-hmm.
I still sometimes don't believe it, and I get very, um, I get very like, is this really happening? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very humbled by it, and but I'm also then I realize, okay, this person, it's time for me to shut up, and it's time to listen to what this person has to tell
Mm-hmm.
me and ask me for input or answer questions, because I've done enough of that, sharing my story to people,
Mm-hmm.
where let them talk, let them listen. It makes me feel really good that I am helping people.
Mm-hmm.
More than just the one. I work as a sales rep in the power tool accessories
Mm-hmm.
industry, and I go to a lot of hardware stores, and
Mm-hmm.
so I work through dealers, and I'm a personal guy, so I build relationships, and a lot of the ones I'm close with know about the book, and several of them have bought it, and I've signed it for them. And I've had more than one come up to me and say, I'm happily married now, on my second marriage or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But reading your book, number one, pissed me off. I had one dealer was like, "It pissed me off for you." He goes, "But you made me realize who my ex was.
Mm-hmm.
I really thought it was me. I really thought I was the problem." And then he was able to stuff it away and move on, get remarried. He's happy. But he goes, reading this, that's how it also helps people, is realizing they may be out of the relationship, but they might be harboring some unhealed wounds from that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've told me it's helped them get answers for what they
Mm-hmm.
were going through.
So the woman who connected the two of us, Chelsea, oh my gosh, I can't remember her
Chelsea
last.
Brooke Cole.
Yes, Chelsea Brooke Cole. She's the woman that connected us, and I had interviewed her quite a while back, for my
Hmm.
podcast, and I heard her story, and I was listening to it. It was like, oh my God, a light bulb went off because I realized my first boyfriend, a guy I dated, many, many years ago, he was a narcissist. I thought that maybe he was just moody, but a
Yeah.
lot of the things I was like, and I intuitively knew, you know, this wasn't going to work out. And I actually ended up, breaking up with him and he wouldn't take no for an answer. So that's the main reason why I moved to Colorado.
Wow. Okay.
Because I
Yeah.
figured, you know what? He's not taking no for an answer. He's still around. I think it's time to leave town. So instead of leaving town, I just left and went all the way halfway across the country. And that's how I ended up in
Wow. Good for
Denver.
you. That takes a lot
Yeah.
of bravery right there. Yeah.
Well, it was a lot of courage, and I was willing to come by myself, but fortunately, one of my college roommates, we were at this large teaching hospital the last 2 years of college, and in Pittsburgh, and she was originally from Cleveland. And after graduation, she didn't want to stay in Pittsburgh. I understood that. She didn't want to go back to Cleveland either. And I could understand that too. So I just looked at her and I said, Hey, Jan, let's go to Colorado. And she said, Okay. So,
Wow.
we just packed up my little 1974 Ford Maverick that didn't start all the time. I had to get under the hood a lot of times and start it by hand.
There you
But we
go.
made it out here and we're both still here.
I was just going to ask you if she's still there and you're still friends.
Yes, we're still friends. As a matter
That's
of fact,
amazing.
we had dinner together with her and her new husband. She married badly the first time, but we had dinner with her just a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago. It's just recently. So yeah, had a
Yeah.
great time.
Well, that's great. And just so you know, too, my first two marriages were not narcissists. I get along. I was married very young the first time. The second one, you'll have to read the book because it involves that.
Hmm.
But I'm extremely close with my son's mom. The second one, we're
Hmm.
like family. And when you read the book, you'll be shocked that that happened. And also, and the first one is my daughter. My daughter's 27, the
Oh
nurse.
wow.
She lives in Arizona, and her mom and I get along just fine too. I married when I was
Hmm.
like 20, so and I'm not. It's not a proud thing that it's my third marriage, third
Hmm.
divorce. But I feel like, for me, it was there was a pattern I was going through too.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a pattern of me, and I talk about that in the book. What was my issue? What was the part I played in this? We didn't really talk about that. We don't have to, but the the number one thing I say sometimes is I kind of owe Tammy a little bit of gratitude because doing what she did to me made me stop and realize my pattern.
Yeah.
And I stopped it. And now I recognized it. Step two. And number three is, where do I go from here?
Hmm.
How do I choose the people I'm with, who I love,
Hmm.
who I let in my inner circle?
Hmm.
And that's the important part. And I don't know if I'd be here today doing this. Obviously, I wouldn't be if I was still with her,
Hmm.
and so that's a very important part of it.
Well, there are blessings that come from some of these
Hmm.
terrible experiences. And,
Yep.
you have a great relationship with your son. You have a great relationship with your girlfriend. You have a really adorable dog. You've got a great book. You're an author. And, I'm just going to put it out there. I don't think I would be surprised if you did write another book eventually. I
Yeah,
just
you
wouldn't
never
be
know.
surprised.
You never know.
Mhm.
But also, the last thing I want to plug is I will be featured in an upcoming documentary on narcissism. It's called Empathy Not Included.
Mhm.
You can follow them on Instagram, one word. I don't know. I think it might be on HBO, but it could be Hulu, Netflix. But I filmed for that a year and a half ago,
Okay.
and I'm one of the survivor stories. This
Okay.
is
So
a huge film that's coming out.
I am going to look that up.
Okay.
Or if you have a link to it, you can email it to me or whatever. But I
Okay.
definitely want to include that in the show notes. Has it gotten, it hasn't been,
Coming out in 2025. They didn't say, if you go on their Instagram, it says coming early 2025.
okay. When it does go live or does come out, will you do me a favor and email me so I'll put it in the
Yes.
show notes? So I'm sure the listeners would love to see it and hear
Yes,
it.
and it's not just me, it's a
Right.
whole documentary on narcissism.
So women and men.
Yes,
Okay.
there's world-renowned psychologists on it, so there's experts, there's survivor stories, women and men, and there's I think two self-aware narcissists. They do actually exist.
Wow.
There are some people on social media that are self-aware narcissists that are trying to undo some damage and trying to help as much as they can, but do admit it's a daily struggle, it's a battle, and that this is there is no cure for this.
Yeah.
And but less than 1% of all narcissists actually seek help or get therapy because why? They don't believe anything's wrong with them.
No, it's not them, it's you.
Not them, it's you.
Yeah.
So
Well, Doug, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for
you're
sharing
welcome.
your
Thank you.
story. I mean, it takes a lot of courage.
Thank
It
you. I
really
appreciate
does.
you. Thank you.
And I understand that. And yeah, I'm just very happy for you that you've landed in a really good place in your life, and have the book and the great relationships, because you certainly deserve it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. And please share this episode with everybody you know, especially if you suspect that you might be in a narcissistic relationship, or somebody you love and care about is in a narcissistic relationship. There's a lot of really great information that Doug shared with us. Do get his book, check it out. Like I said, there are a lot of details and stories that he hasn't shared with us, but you can read about it when you get his book. And do remember, if you see a red flag, you might want to pay attention to it. And
Yep.
that is the way of the FemiNinja.